Well, welcome everyone. My name is Bill Sellers. I'm the president and founder of National History Academy, and we're thrilled tonight to have a National Park Service Superintendents panel moderated by David Vella, the acting director of National Park Service in 2019 and 2020. And just to give you some background on National History Academy, we're a program that was founded in 2018. We've operated residential programs in both 2018 and 2019 for top high school students from around the country and around the world to come together to talk about the foundations of American democracy, to use history as a resource for understand the times that we're living in now. And we utilize an education approach that combines place-based learning, speakers such as the ones that we're having tonight, cases developed by the Case Method Institute and Harvard Business School professor David Moss, and a parliamentary debate program that was partially funded by the College Board when we started out. So those aspects of the program really create a compelling approach to education, history education, to what it means to be an American in modern times in 2021. Tonight, we're thrilled to have David Vella. David joined the board of the Journey Through Hallowed Ground National Heritage Area, the parent organization of National History Academy, earlier this year. He served as acting director of National Park Service in 2019 and 2020, the first Latino director of National Park Service. Prior to that service, he was superintendent of Grand Teton National Park, George Washington National Parkway, Palo Alto National Battlefield, Lyndon Johnson National Historic Park. And I know I'm missing some, David, but I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our panel. We're thrilled to have you and everyone on the panel here this evening.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Katie, and to all of the folks at Journey Through Hallowed Ground and the National History Academy. It is indeed an honor for me to join this program, and thank you all for your interest in sharing with America the importance of all Americans, the stories of all Americans, but in this particular case, the story of Latino Americans in history and current day. And I'm deeply humbled and honored to have an opportunity to join you tonight. It's also my pleasure to see some very familiar faces on this screen, faces that I adore deeply, that in my over 30 years in the National Park Service, I had an opportunity to hire some and definitely work with all of them in multiple capacities, either as a regional director or as the deputy director of the National Park Service, and clearly as the acting director in Washington. Today we have, they're more than welcome to introduce themselves a little bit later in the program, but Myrna Palfrey, superintendent from San Juan in Puerto Rico. We have Gordy Wilson, superintendent at Castillo de San Marcos and Fort Matanzas National Monuments in Florida. Ruben Andrade, who is the superintendent at Cesar Chavez. And unfortunately, we were going to have Dennis Vasquez, but Dennis just sent me a note that he's having technical difficulties. Dennis retired from the National Park Service. He was superintendent at Brown v. Board. He was superintendent at Guadalupe Mountains in Texas, at Petroglyph in New Mexico. And after retiring, he joined the New Mexico State Park System, where he served as director of operations for the New Mexico State Park System. But unfortunately, Dennis won't be able to join us. And he just recently retired twice, both from the National Park Service and just a couple of days ago from the New Mexico State Park System. So we're unfortunately won't be able to have Dennis with us. But what I'd like to do is just ask each of the superintendents just to quickly introduce themselves. And if they can, for the purpose of the audience, just if they can give one example or one point of interest that really makes their site unique for the benefit of the audience. So let's start with Myrna. Myrna, I think you're on mute. There you
Yep,
go.
I always do that. Sorry, folks.
Hey, you're in good
Thank you,
company. I do it too.
David. And thank you, Bill and David, all of you for inviting me to be part of this panel. I think it's so important that we're able to share our experience, especially with the youth. It's so important that you can see what we went through and what we did, and see that there's a path there that you can follow if that's your interest. So I'm in San Juan, Puerto Rico, San Juan National Historic Site. I have been with the National Park Service for 34 years. Not retiring quite yet, but enjoying it. Puerto Rico, it's just such an amazing site. I don't know how many out there listening to us have visited, but let me see, something unique. Oh my goodness. So it is said, I don't know if Gordy will agree, but it is said that we have the Ordóñez Cannon, which is supposed to be the oldest and largest Spanish cannon that is in any national park. So I don't know, I'm gonna throw that out there and maybe there'll be some fact finding, but, but I'm so glad to be here.
Berna, while you have the floor, do you remember one thing, at least one thing that drove you to pursue a career? And I'm gonna ask this of all the panelists. One thing that drove you to pursue a career in the Park Service?
I'll tell you, I'll be very honest with you all. When I started with the Park Service, I was very young, right? My last year in college, my 4th year in college, I hadn't quite finished college, I hadn't graduated yet. And the opportunity came up. And I wasn't pursuing a career in the National Park Service. I was pursuing a career in the federal government. Coming from Puerto Rico, I knew I wanted to work in the federal government. And the Park Service called, they interviewed, and I got the job. But I will tell you, quickly into the job, I fell in love with our mission. We have an awesome mission. And just taking care, protecting these places for all the generations to come. It's just a really heartfelt mission that I fell in love with. And so it became my career. 34 years later, I'm still here.
Bill, I had the honor of hiring Myrna as the first Latina superintendent at the only U.S.-Mexican war property in the entire National Park System at Palo Alto. Yes. And so very proud of her. She was I believe, the administrative officer at Chamizal National Memorial in El Paso, and did a phenomenal job and took that park to higher levels. I think she was the 4th superintendent in the park's history. So
thank you. Thank you.
Job well done.
Thank you, David, for that.
Welcome. So next we have Gordy Wilson. Gordy, share a little bit about yourself. One thing that makes your park unique. Now you have 2 sites. And also, what was the seminal moment that allowed you to pursue a career in the National Park Service? There you go.
Can you hear me now?
You're good.
There's several points. I grew up in a very small community. In my county that I grew up in, there were more cows than people. So I spent a lot of time outdoors. And so outdoor recreation fascinated me, and getting into the Park Service. But I think the thing that was most inspirational to me was when I was in college. I'm not sure where I wanted to go. We had a National Park Superintendent come and address one of our recreation classes. I went to the State University of New York at Cortland, and my decision was made that day. I did an internship and went on from there. And I think the other thing that makes this a really exciting opportunity for me is for many years, before I was a superintendent, and I've been a superintendent for 34 years now, I did a lot of recruiting, and I went to colleges, and I spoke with classes in outdoor recreation and parks and recreation, and recruited a lot of people into the service. And you've been around a long time when many of them are retired already, but I'm still here. So it's really exciting to me to have the opportunity to tell people what a fulfilling career this can be. And as Myrna said, the mission drives us. It's so important that we preserve these sites and share the stories that they have, because they are inspirational and they are life-changing. And many of us who are in this do it for the passion, not for any other reason, and that we enjoy what we do. The Castillo de San Marcos, I think it's very unique about our site is we're the oldest continuously occupied European settlement in North America. And because outside of Florida, most people think it's Jamestown was here first. Well, as some of the folks in St. Augustine like to say, by the time Jamestown was founded, St. Augustine was going through its first urban renewal phase. So we have some very exciting stories to tell. It's also the home of the first free African-American settlement in the continental United States, Fort Mose. So diversity is really what we do, and we have some just outstanding stories to tell.
Well, and Gordy also has, I guess, a little history with the Vela family, and that Gordy not only has one Vela that works for him, but two Velas that actually work for him, and they serve him proudly in that park. My son and my daughter-in-law. So we take advantage of the opportunity to get down to San Augustine and Castillo often, and enjoy everything that Gordy and his amazing staff have to offer. Thank you, Gordy. Before I introduce Ruben, a quick little story. I had, growing up in the 70s, had an opportunity to hear an American icon, and that was Cesar Chavez at a rally in Detroit, Michigan, while my dad was getting his master's degree at the University of Michigan, along with Cesar's son-in-law. And so the next speaker is someone that actually is responsible for maintaining that legacy and sharing that legacy with the nation, or current and future generations to come. Ruben Andrade is the superintendent of Cesar Chavez. Ruben, the floor is yours. There you go. You just went back to mute.
There we
and
go.
You're good.
Gracias, David. Gracias, Bill, for inviting me to be here with all of you. It's an honor. My name is Ruben Andrade. I am here being the person managing this beautiful site. I hope someday you all get to come up. Just wanted me to introduce myself, or did you have a question for me?
No, go ahead and yeah, just a little bit, introduce yourself for a minute, and then what's the one thing that you think makes your site what it is, and how did you, and why did you pursue a career in the Park Service? What was there a seminal moment or experience that drove you to wear the green and gray?
Sure. So David, as you know, I'm living the dream. When I was probably in middle school, my oldest brother, Sarapio, had been home from the Army in Vietnam for a couple of years, and got a job at Sequoia National Park as a maintenance person. He was a heavy equipment operator. And even though my dad was a World War II veteran, forever in Tejas, the national parks had never been much of an interest to him. We were a farm labor family. But once Sarapio got up to Sequoia, we visited him often. It's where I saw my first deer, saw the first bear, and just saw the beauty of nature, saw the beauty of the Sierras. And I think at that point, my first dream was etched into my life, and that someday maybe I could have a job like Sarapio had. And I didn't really care what that might be, as long as I was living the life that he was. So yeah, so it's been a good haul, and still doing it here. One unique thing about my park is that it tells the story of a modern day Latino hero. It tells the story of a living story, the there's still farm workers in the field, and the UFW is still changing life for them a little bit at a time. So it's something that, you know, we get to hear on the news that maybe finally the farm laborers have gotten the opportunity to earn overtime, which all other Americans have done it for many, many, many years, but just recently have they. So we have a direct connection to it here. As I said, my family was farm labor, so to be here is and to protect this site and make it move forward as a relatively new site. You know, just last Friday, we had our 9th anniversary, which is really, really, really young as far as parks go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I remember when we were kids in Ann Arbor, in Michigan, we were not a family of financial means at all. But when we would go strike at the grocery stores to picket the selling of grapes because of what was happening to our brothers and sisters in the farmlands of California, well, it was a great time to eat some really good tacos, man. You came to not only carry the picket signs, but to get some really good groceries, man. Yep. Potlucks, tacos. And so when my dad would say, okay, it's the weekend, let's go to the X grocery store, he's like, vámonos, let's go, it's taco time. So I have very fond memories of the strikes and the reason for them. Just as a side note, the reason why I have a picture of Grand Teton National Park that I actually took was Grand Teton National Park for me was the very first park that my family and I experienced in the late 1960s. And the adage is true, going to a national park can not only provide an enriching experience, but like me and my panelist colleagues, it could also change your life. And not only was that the first national park that I experienced, but I became the 21st superintendent of that very national park. So parks have opportunities, as was shared by my colleagues, to not only share important American history, but also to help inspire, and that's the beauty of this program, maybe the next generation, park ranger, interpreter, cultural resource specialist, historian, administrative officer, as Myrna was, chief of facilities, biologist, or maybe a future director of the National Park Service. So thank you so much for those comments and perspectives. And Bill, would you like me to turn it back over to you and Katie for any further follow-up?
Yeah, we can definitely take some questions. So our viewers, feel free to add more questions to the chat. And just a quick introduction, my name is Katie Smoller. I'm the Director of Educational Programs at the National History Academy, and I'll be helping with the Q&A session here. So our first question that we had, what's the biggest challenge you found in telling or preserving your site's history? Yes.
Myrna, you want to start it off? Kate, I don't think she can unmute. There you go.
Okay, there we go. It was telling me that I couldn't unmute. One of here in Puerto Rico, one of the main challenges is getting young students, elementary school, middle school kids from the inner island to come out to the capital. This is the capital of Puerto Rico. Now Puerto Rico is 100 miles long. It's a tiny island. But the roads, there's poorer, there's poverty in the island, and getting young kids to come here on field trips, it's a real challenge. And I've worked in 8 national parks, so I know that I'm not saying anything new to the superintendents, or you're probably going, yeah, that's a challenge everywhere. But it truly becomes difficult, not only the funding to get the children here, just the educational system, the way, the way the classes and all, the way it interacts. And I'll share with you guys, there's a little bit of Commonwealth of Puerto Rico versus federal government issues that sometimes influence these things. So getting the kids to the sites is a challenge. We have more luck getting all the children to visit with their parents on a weekend. That happens quite often. But for folks to come from the mountains to Old San Juan is sometimes like a big deal, and it doesn't happen as often as, as we would like. So I would say that even the outreach, getting programs to schools with the technology to the inner island is also a humongous challenge. And believe me when I say with this, we've been really proven here with the pandemic and having to communicate and doing more of the virtual classrooms. It's been real difficult for our interpretive staff, the park rangers that get the programs, and our educational staff to reach the children, and the school grade, all through high school is very challenging. So creating those programs to get out there and touch them and be sure that if they can't get here, we get there. That has become one of our main focuses.
Gordy or Ruben, do you have anything to add a perspective?
Sure. I mentioned earlier that we're a relatively new park, and for parks that are built by proclamation, by presidential proclamation, often don't have the initial resources to get going. So up until August of last year, I was the only NPS employee here. So we were having the challenge of how do I get the word out to the students? How do we tell this story that hasn't been in the limelight for many years? There's generations of students that don't know which Cesar Chavez this park is talking about. There's children of farm laborers that don't know the history of what this has done. The stories from this site have done to make life a little better for those struggling so hard to feed America. So I had to think out the box. I couldn't be in the schools all the time, even though I was trying. But how do I get to these schools through partnerships and through having other park rangers do it? Last year, we were able to finally get staff to the park, so we are able to do a lot more than we had been able to do in the first 8 years. Mostly through through virtual education. We have an education tech now that has done a lot to build our program to get out and get into the schools and tell these stories. And so many folks don't know of these American stories that originate from this site, but we're getting there. You always got to work out the envelope, reach out any way you can to make things happen. When you have a passion for something, and people that help you have a passion for the story, it'll happen. It's always a struggle, but si se puede.
I heard that somewhere. Gordy?
I would say that one of our biggest challenges is the opposite of Myrna's. We have a tremendous demand for on-site visits, and it causes visitor use issues for us. So our biggest challenge is managing those and making it a meaningful educational visit and hopefully an inspirational visit. And so it's got to be the right visitor experience. The other challenge that we really look forward to making further progress in is our outreach using virtual programs and using social media to reach students and developing those connections and bringing those folks in. So anybody who is thinking about a career in the National Park Service, I would encourage you to follow that path and the generation that is coming out of their college years now is so technologically advanced. That's something that we really need more expertise in, and that would be such a help to us, to help us become, as an agency, more agile as we move through technology. And the outreach can't all be in person. Our parks are so crowded now, but there's so many opportunities to make those connections. And even planning your visits and making your reservations to go to national parks now. Many are now online. So those skills are really important, not only on the outside for our visitors, from the inside. So we know how that works as well.
And it's interesting you say that, Gordon, because the opportunities that we've had at National History Academy the last 2 years, we were not thinking that. We thought online would be part of our longer term programming, but we were forced to shift from in-person to online in 2020. And we've been able to share so many richer stories, more diverse stories, geographically, to be able to do what we've done over the last month with 2 to 3 visits to national park sites and other unique sites that tell the wide array of stories related to Hispanic heritage. It's a huge opportunity, and I think we're trying to weigh Zoom fatigue versus the opportunity to reach so many more students, and I think it's going to balance out. But it's an amazing tool.
All right, our next question comes from one of our students, Ashton. How does the NPS interact or deal with state parks that might also have a similar interest with preserving and managing a historic site? So I don't know if there's anyone in particular who wants to tackle that one.
Yeah, I can help with that. Our first director, Stephen Mather, the agency was created in 1916, recognized early on that our state park partners were extremely important. And engaged them at that time. And I had the honor of speaking on behalf of the National Park Service at the State Park Conference that they had in Arkansas a couple of years ago. And I reinforced that history between the national parks and the state parks, but also to the importance of the partnerships. And how do we leverage capacity together? Whether it's stories, whether it's training, whether it's interpretive training or law enforcement training, but also learning about the audience space, especially when you have state parks that are near National Park Service units. So that's a very good question, because we had over 100-year history with our state park partners, which I think is very unique, at least with the federal government.
Katie, can I share something real quick?
Yeah, of course. We'd love to hear from all of you.
So I just wanted to share. So here in Puerto Rico, so the park has, the city of Old San Juan, the old city, is surrounded by historic, huge historic walls. And so you have to do historic preservation. Our masons, we have a team of expert masons, about 70 of them. And we divide them into brigades, right? And they go around the wall, and this is years and years. By the time you finish one wall, you got to go back and start already, because this is just a continuous upkeep to these walls. So likewise, there's state parks and like the Institute of Culture, the tourism department, they also own buildings and historic structures that need this type of upkeep, and they don't have the expertise, many of them. The Commonwealth of Puerto Rico doesn't have the funding to maintain these historic structures at the level that they need. And so more and more national parks, and everyone, I think even, state parks, national parks, affiliated sites, we are partnering, and we're doing more, like David said, leveraging resources just to help each other out and survive because of funding cuts and everything. Everybody is, what I have found in my 34 years, we are being flexible, more flexible with that, with our resources, our folks, our money, our time. creating these partnerships where, for example, we have a training crew that goes out and trains the municipality of San Juan, preservation crew, or the Institute of Culture, so that they can also, begin to have a more scheduled preservation schedule. And so I just see that it's more and more sharing of resources, and not just being the Park Service, we're the Park Service and we just take care of this. Where I think we as an agency have grown and have become more flexible with this.
And I have a question of everyone. And looking back at your careers over the last 20 to 30 years, and David, I know that you were the Director of Workforce and Inclusion at National Park Service, but where was National Park Service at the beginning of your careers on diversity and inclusion issues? What progress has been made up to now? And then where are we going? So with our student body, it's we've got such a diverse group of young people from all around the country, and they like to see themselves in the story. And I know that the National Park, I know from experience how great a job National Park Service is doing with that. But what have you seen, and what do you see coming?
Yeah, Bill, that's a very good question. I remember my first national park as a permanent ranger was at the Missions in San Antonio, and we actually opened up that new national park. 90% of the entire permanent workforce were Latino. That's unheard of. The superintendent was Latino. The chief ranger was Latino. We had 4 historic missions, all the site supervisors, including me, Latino. Unfortunately, that's not the case in national parks around the country today. We have frankly struggled over time, and now 80% of our entire permanent workforce does not reflect the face of America. It was frankly one of my biggest challenges as a regional director, as the associate director for workforce relevance and inclusion, as deputy director, and as acting director. But the good news is that with partnerships like with the National History Academy and youth conservation corps around the country, specialized programs that Myrna and Ruben and Gordy have are helping to change the paradigm. And I think what is really helping to change that is just telling our stories. The sesquicentennial of the Civil War, the 150th anniversary of the Civil War, in the Southeast region, which I had the honor of running, we told stories that had never been told before. We did the first ever publication on Hispanics in the Civil War, from battlefield to home front. I was the chief ranger at Appomattox Courthouse in Virginia, where Lee surrendered to Grant. I had no clue what my Latino ancestors did during the Civil War. It took a decade for me to later find out, and I was amazed. We did the first ever publication on Asian Americans in the Civil War, American Indians in the Civil War. Gordy, the 450th anniversary of the founding of our nation's oldest city, the stories that Gordy and his staff told and continue to tell. And Myrna and Ruben in contemporary times with Cessa, that's the game changer. I think that's what's going to help motivate and inspire the next generation of diverse public servants and diverse employees of the National Park Service, because they're going to want a piece of not only learning about our history and heritage, but being a part of an organization that values it. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
I do. In the southeastern United States, about 26% of our population is Hispanic. And when I talk about the outreach that we can do with virtual programming to make those connections, to connect with those 4th graders, connect with those 8th graders, that's where that inspiration takes place. That's where our next generation of park rangers come from. We have amazing stories to tell. These sites that we're talking about today all have those Latino, Hispanic connections. So when I say that that outreach is a challenge for us. I think that's really what builds the next generation, because those connections are just there waiting to be made, in my estimation.
Yeah, I agree with you, both of you. I think another thing that really works is getting folks that look like people in our communities to actually go into our communities. You don't know how many times, especially at this park, having to go out and share this story. How many times I've heard, and even throughout my career, somebody say, "Mira, mira quién? Look who's there! Like, he's one of us." And then to share the stories wherever I've worked, I've never just shared the story of that park. When you have communities that are not aware of what's out there, and nobody comes to give them the chocolate to come out to be at these places, they stay unaware. I mentioned my dad's whole family is from Texas. He was a World War II veteran, and until my brother got a job at a national park site, he had never taken the rest of his family. To just work with organizations that work with the different cultures of America, so that we could start having the folks from these cultures, not just Latinos, but all, to be there and say, you know what, I like this. This is better than going to the movies. This is better than going to playing videos. I like it out here. They all will like it for a different reason. But if we could figure out ways to get more Latinos into these beautiful resources, into America's treasures.
And even, yes, we tell the story, and we got to get the stories out, and that's how we become relevant with our visitors, with our communities, with the children. But like echoing really what you all are saying, and I have a day sketched in my mind. I worked in Biscayne National Park, and we had a day where we would bring inner city youth to the park in buses, and they would come. And I can't tell you how many kids they lived in Miami all their life, and they had never been to the beach. They had never picked up, fish or the turtles, and it blows your mind. You can't believe it. And when they go to the national park, you're telling this story, you're bringing them there, and then they're seeing a Hispanic, I get the Spanglish going on, and you talk to them in English and Spanish, and they're seeing, hey, that's like me, I could probably wear that uniform. How cool, they hold your hand, and all of you I know have had those experiences. But time and time again in El Paso, same thing. Here in Puerto Rico, it's like, well, how, Park Service, federal government, that's really cool. How many parks are there? So you've been in other parks, telling the story of the park, and then they see you, they see us. So I think the agency is growing a lot with that. Our agency culture, it was a certain way, and like David mentioned, years ago, we have a lot of work to do, but we're moving in the right direction, in my opinion, and with these programs and everything that's going on now.
It's all great to hear. And our next question for everyone, it's kind of a fun one. Is there any particular site you wish you would have worked at? Maybe David, if you want to start us off with that one. Not to get anyone in trouble, but
yeah. I had 409. I got that question a lot from the media when I was running the Park Service, and my answer was I had 419 very special places. I thought at one time, because Yellowstone was also after Grand Teton, Yellowstone was the next park, and I always thought that I wanted to maybe work one day in Yellowstone. Here's something, an irony. After that experience, I started applying for seasonal park ranger jobs at Yellowstone and Grand Teton in the 1970s. I wasn't good enough to get a seasonal ranger job, but I was good enough to be superintendent and running Grand Teton. Go figure that one out. But after spending 6 years in Grand Teton, 6 months of winter, minus 20 degrees below zero temperatures, Yellowstone wasn't enticing anymore. I had the honor of, frankly, serving all of them and being a part of them, and I have zero regrets. I was deeply blessed to. Now, it took over 100 years for the President of the United States to nominate a Latino to run the National Park Service, but it happened, and I will always be blessed for that opportunity and to work with these amazing superintendents. 419 at the time. We have more units now. So that's my answer. I'm sticking to it.
I would say that a few years ago, and David, you'd certainly remember the Find Your Park campaign. When you think of over 400 sites and the different connections that they have, because they have so many different themes. We have railroads, we have mountains, we have rivers, we have wildlife, we have Fat Bear Week, and Google that for those of you who haven't seen what that is. But there is something out there to connect with almost anyone. So if you visit a park, if you pick one at random and you go there, you will find something that really excites you. The stories are so diverse. A park may have been created because of a certain resource or a certain point of national significance, but there is something else there that nobody ever thought about that they found after the park was established. So that's why the service is so inspiring, because our areas have to be inspiring to even be in the system.
Mm-hmm. I always thought I would have the opportunity to work in Hawaii, the Hawaiian volcanoes, one of the Hawaiian parks, and I never did. But I don't know, I mean, I vacationed there, so. And Puerto Rico's close enough.
Thanks, Werner. Ruben.
Yeah, there's not one particular place, but earlier I told you I was living the dream. So I had the opportunity to go back and finish my education in 93. When Caesar passed away, I thought to myself, maybe now we could have a park for Caesar. And it just stayed in the back of my brain. Right around 2001 or so, I was at a Chiefs of Interest conference in Estes Park, Rocky Mountain. And there was a man there that I'd heard his name rumbled, and I guess he'd heard mine too. But we met there, a man by the name of Bill Gwaltney. And he says, hey, we've never met. I'd like to talk to you. Can we go to lunch? So we went to a fancy restaurant, McDonald's. We went to McDonald's and had lunch, and we're talking, and then Bill says, hey, Ruben, do you have a dream in the Park Service? I says, Bill, you mean, goals, aspirations? He says, well, I said dream. Do you have a dream? I says, yeah, I do. He says, I want to be the first superintendent of Cesar Chavez National Park site, whatever that may be. Bill says, Ruben, he says, that's not even on the radar. I said, well, yeah, I know, but, hopefully it happens. He says, well, that might not even happen for another 20 years. So maybe I'll be fortunate enough to be around in another 20 years. So, 2012, I was asked if I still wanted to be the first superintendent of Cesar Chavez National Park site. I said, well, yeah, I do. They said, well, even if it's just for a detail, I said, still be the first. So I guess I'm working on my dream park. Here we are. So I thought I'd share that.
That's great to hear. We've got a practical question here, and I know this is something that a lot of students think about when planning their careers. Said it seems like there's a lot of relocation with the National Park Service. What does that look like? How does it work?
Relocation. If I understand correctly, so my opinion, I started here in San Juan as a GS3, okay, General Schedule 3. You know that our positions rank in numerical from 3 all the way to 15 for the general schedule, what they call the general schedule. So the lowest position you could have was a 3 because they didn't have 2s. They hired me as a 2, and then a week later they promoted me because they said, you know, HR said there's no 2s. You got a promotion. You're a 3 now. 1 week into the job. But I knew quickly when I started here that folks in Puerto Rico tended not, back then, that was 86, they tended not to move. You live in Puerto Rico, your family's here, and most people stay. So most of the employees, I knew, you know, I knew that I wouldn't be able to promote from within. I would have to move. I would have to relocate, and that was, if I don't know if my colleagues are going to agree. I think that was like the agency, the trend back then, or the culture, is that you had to move around to different parks if you wanted to promote. I think it's less now. I think there's more opportunities in parks now. And there's less moves, but back then it was very much you would have to compete for another job or for another opportunity. But there's 420 some parks. There's all kinds of opportunities. So it was a competitive process where you would apply for a position, you know, wherever there's openings, and you would compete if you're selected. There's different scenarios. There's positions that are entirely paid for your move. Others are not. Others are partial. So there's different scenarios there. But I would say that, in my opinion, I think it's changed a little bit. I don't think it's I might be wrong. This is more my opinion. I think there's less moves now. I think, but it used to be very, very, very much the way you moved. You promoted was by relocating.
Gordy?
I would say that there is definitely a trend away from the itinerant park worker that many of us started at with seasonal positions. And there's various reasons for that. There may not be as many seasonal positions as there were 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And the reality is we have parks that only have, as Ruben can attest to, 1 person. We have parks that have 400 or 500 people. So at some situations, there are opportunities to progress in your career in the same park and be promoted and have other jobs in that same park at a higher pay grade. And other parks that may not be as much of an opportunity. There are some disciplines in the Park Service where we don't have as much turnover as others. Park rangers tend to move maybe a little more frequently than maintenance workers. Administrative people maybe more than maintenance, but less than some other disciplines. But I think the reality is that everyone will figure that out for themselves as they make their career decisions. And there's no wrong answer. You just need to understand that, like in many occupations, that if you want to be mobile, there are some advantages to that. If you choose not to be mobile, there's probably less opportunities for promotion, but those are individual decisions. And we have some fantastic employees that have not moved. I've been in the same park for 30 years as superintendent in January. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask about mobility. I've been very fortunate to be able to be here and have some great employees to support me over the years, but mobility is a consideration.
But
Yeah, I think that in my experience, moving has been good. Because if you stay in one spot, you have to wait for somebody else to move out before you can get a spot. I worked for the Army Corps of Engineers for a little bit, and in order to get promoted to even the next grade, the next level, you had to go on a detail to another park. They felt that if you went somewhere else and worked, you might learn some things that you might not pick up with the park you're at, or at the project they're called. So sometimes you move for a promotion. Sometimes one can move for a lateral so that they could build their portfolio to become more competitive for the next position. So I moved a little bit at the beginning, but towards the end, don't know that I'd move anywhere else. Yeah, so it just depends on each individual's preferences.
Yeah, Katie, those are very good perspectives. For me personally, we've moved over a public service career of 38 years over 12 times. We had 3 moves to Washington, D.C. And I've had these conversations with many of my colleagues over the years, but especially colleagues of color. These can be very difficult decisions. I was fortunate, I married my kindergarten classmate and high school sweetheart, and we've been married for 41 years. And Mrs. Vela has been very much a part of every decision that we've had to make. And I've seen too where decisions are made that just disrupt the nuclear family, unfortunately. And so you have to be very careful in making sure that it is a joint mutual decision, because in this case, the spouse is going to be impacted. My wife has a degree in accounting, and in 42 years of marriage, she probably had 1 accounting job. And in one move to Virginia, when I was chief ranger at Appomattox Courthouse, she actually taught keyboarding and was a varsity high school tennis coach as a job. In fact, one of her students is now the current superintendent of Appomattox Courthouse National Historical Park. So you never know. But it's difficult when you have these discussions with the nuclear family. But you got to own it. You have to be sincere. You have to be transparent of, here's the opportunity. Here's what it looks like. Maybe staying for X period of time. Here's the potential impact to the family, good, bad, or indifferent. But it's a conversation that has to be had, full transparency and full buy-in. And when that happens, as Ruben said a couple of times, you can really live the dream.
Incredibly helpful. Thank you. This next question I'm going to read from a student. Can I go to college and work with the NPS during summers? I would definitely be interested in summer work. What qualifications would I need?
Verna, you want to take that?
Sure. There's plenty of internships throughout the Park Service. I would say search for internships in USA Jobs or however they're searching, calling parks. There's parks that their whole summer hiring is just internships. Florida parks, I mean, the South Florida parks did a lot of that. I've never did an internship, but in the parks that I've been in, we really use those a lot. Whenever we can, they're a win-win for the park and for the employee and for the student. So I think there's plenty of opportunities for internships out there.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the other thing too that kind of gets missed a little bit is that volunteer experience in the national park counts as paid experience. And the mistake I've seen a number of folks that love national parks and want to work in national parks is they'll get a degree. My degree was in park management. That's good. That's one box to check. But they have no experience to back it up. And so in that sense, you're going to be competing with rangers that had worked seasonally for 6 to 8 seasons, 10 seasons. That's your competition. So while you're going to college, pursue every single opportunity that you can to volunteer in a national park or a state park. And that experience is equally compelling. But don't wait to get that degree and think you're going to be marketable, because frankly, you're not. And the other thing too to think about, there are more opportunities for permanent positions in your larger urban areas because of turnover. The National Mall, Independence National Historical Park in Philadelphia, the Arch in St. Louis. Your large urban parks provide a lot more opportunity because, to Gordy's point, there are more employees. So it may take you out of your comfort zone, but if you can get that experience and put on that uniform, that green and gray uniform, which is our nation's uniform, then that's going to help increase your marketability. But don't wait. It's a great question.
I've got another question, and it's not just how do we get young people to see themselves in the American story through our national parks, through historic sites, and through museums, but how do we get those who, those in rural America, those in cities that don't have the sites that you all represent, and don't have that base of knowledge, to know about these stories. I think about when I was growing up and the history books that I had, and then I think about the experience that we have had at National History Academy over the last month, taking 2 or 3 trips a week to these defining and very formative stories that are at places like San Juan and Cesar Chavez and Palo Alto and Castillo de San Marcos, the Tenement Museum and the Puerto Rican story there. They're all stories that I certainly was not aware of growing up, and a lot of students still are not exposed to these important stories, and it's all part of our collective experience. And what else can we do to to use our history, use our diverse history to break down some of those walls at a time when the country's often seems to be coming apart. I think we can definitely use these stories to pull us back together. And I was just wondering what some of your strategies are to achieve that.
Gordy?
Well, I go back to the virtual experiences that we try to create. And for us, the importance of learning how to reach those audiences, we actually have worked with different universities to try to develop specific outreach programs in certain geographic areas, and reaching out to those communities that you want to reach out to and developing those connections. We actually brought some students in from Latino students in from the Jacksonville area, from the Orlando area, and just talked about, why don't you visit these sites? Why do you not come and see us? What are the barriers? And we identified some. And so those are we need to be purposeful and mindful about those efforts, and really think strategically about how those gaps can be filled.
We're expanding much more on our social media, on the Facebook and all of that, to reach audiences in the mainland, because we're here on the island, and so we're trying to join groups. The last that I can remember, our chief of interpretation, the rangers that give the tours and all of that, and our chief of education also, we're saying we're reaching more, we're becoming more relevant, and we're opening the door through music and dance of the Caribbean. The mainland, the young people there, they're really signing up to start, where we can start telling our story of these forts and of the settlement and of the island through music, beginning through the African culture, the Caribbean, and all of that. And they're starting through there, and they're expanding on that. They're also getting on bilingual forums on social media. But like Gordy was saying, we're expanding for us on outreach. It's more outreach and getting these kids that can't get here, and getting folks from the Caribbean or youth from the Caribbean, from South America. We get folks contacted through social media. A lot of people from South America and from the mainland. It's their experience of San Juan National Historic Site is through the music and through these programs, these cultural programs that are based on music, instruments, and dance of Puerto Rico, and that's how it starts.
Yeah, we're we started out with just one platform of social media, and now we're trying to reach in some other ones. I think learning and reading what people have liked has helped us to keep pumping out some more of that. I know that both our Facebook and our Instagram are growing every day. Our ed tech person takes care of that. Before that, I had somebody contract before we had somebody, and they would do, tell me what people were getting, were hitting more and were appreciating. So we started, turning some of those pieces of history. They seemed to maybe at one time liked some of the old history, the untold stories that weren't being shared enough. And it's amazing. I'll sit there and sometimes my phone keeps blowing up because more and more people are following what our ed tech is putting out. So when we see a lot of stuff, getting hit because people are following us, we try to tell more stories about that. And then also networking with other chiefs and other places, trying to figure out how we could do more virtual stuff. We just recently were fortunate enough to get a virtual tour done of the Chavez home. It's going nuts. We attach them to our website just in case somebody wants, but a lot of it has to do with networking and sharing what you're doing, and then your network shares it further down the line. For the resources we have, we've been very fortunate, but somebody is giving the time to put on social media.
Thanks, Ruben. Bill, it's a great question. The only thing I'd add, I agree with everything that's been said. The reason why I have this image of Grand Teton as part of my backdrop, because when my parents and my two other siblings visited this park for the first time in the late 60s, 70s, early 70s, there were no visitors that looked like us. There were no Latino rangers. But we saw ourselves on the landscape as Americans. National parks are part of our birthright. So I want every student to see themselves in this image. Pick an image of any national park, take a picture of it, and see yourself not only visiting, but maybe working in this place. That's important. And so images are powerful, experiences are powerful. See yourselves in these images and live the dream in the process.
I think that's a great note to wrap this up. But David, thank you so much for putting together and moderating this panel. Myrna, Ruben, and Gordon, thank you so much for being a part of it. We at National History Academy want to continue to be a part of telling these stories and getting it out to wider audiences, and especially with young people around the country. I think there's a lot that we can build on from what we've done the last 4 weeks, what we've talked about tonight. And we hope to, one of our new programs is history field trips. So we're about to launch this website with historyfieldtrips.org, where we can connect any classroom in the country to any historic site or national park in the country, and allow that to be a part of Katie's developing curriculum as part of that. And then we're creating a standardized approach so we can take everything that individual park units or museums or historic sites are doing and allow teachers to use that as a resource. So I'm envisioning much more that we might be able to do with you to help to tell these incredibly important stories. So thank you again. And Katie, I might let you have the last word and let us know about our plans for our last event of Hispanic Heritage Month, but also keep a look at our website, because we'll continue to do programs with themes of Hispanic heritage and Hispanic history over the course of the next year. So Katie?
Yes, thank you, Bill. And again, thank you all for being with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your insight with us and answering some of our students' questions. And I do, judging by the questions and comments, I feel like we may have some future NPS Rangers or more in this chat today. So thank you again so much. And thank you all at home for joining us. Tomorrow, we'll be concluding our Hispanic Heritage Month programming with the Smithsonian National Museum of American History as we get an inside look at the new play ball exhibit. So hope to see you there tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. And everyone have a wonderful rest of your day.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.